Hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of Cooking with FoodPRO. Today we're going to try and answer the age-old question, why would I pay 25 bucks a pound for this thing when I could pay 11, 12 bucks a pound for this thing and cut my own steaks? It just doesn't make sense. When we actually get into this though, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. We're going to focus on a tenderloin today and look at the advantages of portion cut steaks versus cutting our own steaks. All right, so we have here beef tenderloin, some filet mignon, whatever you want to call it, and we're going to cut it. This one's a choice one right now, and I was really surprised to actually see this. It was $10.94 a pound. Which is a really good price. I usually figure like 13 bucks a pound for tenderloin. This is a PSMO, P-S-M-O. You'll see that in the system. It's peeled. They've actually taken some of the fat off the top of here, and then it has a side muscle on, which is this. A lot of people commonly call it a chain, but that's the SM in our PSMO, is this side muscle here. So we're going to start by removing that. And you can peel it apart here with your fingers down here towards the tail end. When we get up to the head end, we got to do a little cutting to kind of separate it. So I've got a clear separation here, and I'm going to take it off here. But when we talk about the chain, typically people will say, oh, I use this for my stock. I make stock and I put it in there. And let's look at it. Typically, you don't have time to clean this up, and we're just going to throw it in our stock. Well, stock is made from bones, and bouillon, or broth, is made from meat. So, it doesn't really make sense. And being that it's mostly fat here, this chain, and sinew, and all kinds of other good stuff, really doesn't do anything but add more work for you when you're making your stock, because you have to skim that stuff off of there. It's just fat. But up here towards the head end, you actually do get a nice hunk of meat, and that's all meat. I can use that for beef tips. That's what other people talk about, right? And again, I could spend all day cleaning this thing up. Just going to put it over here, but that is a nice hunk of meat, relatively easy to get to. So once I got my chain removed and that hunk taken off of there, now I'm going to start peeling this fat off. Silver skin has to be removed, or should be removed. I guess you don't have to, but if you don't, it's inedible. Flip it over here on the bottom. There's some fat here. We don't want to cut too deep into that, because then we'll get into the meat, and it is an expensive cut of meat. You want to start from the tail end here and start cutting towards the head end, otherwise you'll get steps in your meat, and we want it to be smooth. Down here at the tail, got some fat still hanging on there. Going to kind of block that off. Got it relatively clean. When you get up here to the head, you can actually see there's still some silver skin that kind of goes in like that in a V shape. I'm not going to cut too deep, but I am going to again get that out of there. And then there's our clean tenderloin, ready to be cut into steaks. So thus far, I've got a nice hunk of meat here for beef tips, and then I've got a tenderloin that's clean and ready to be cut into our fillets. So when we're cutting fillets, I like to start here at the head, and let's talk about a couple terms out there. What I've priced out for the cut steaks here is what we call an end-to-end steak. And basically, they've cleaned the tenderloin and they're cutting steaks, so you're going to get some head steaks, This is where the head steak comes from. You're going to get some center cuts, and then you'll get some end cuts. So when you're looking in the system or you're talking the lingo out there, you got head steaks, center cuts, and end cuts. I'm going for an 8-ounce portion here. 8 ounces. And I've got another beef tip. It's no problem. I got a pasta dish that I can use that for. Now I'm getting into my center cuts. When we get down here to the tail piece, it's a little more difficult because you can see it's tapered. These are where your end cuts are coming from. And then what I'm left with is a tail piece. It's more beef tips. All right. So, and that's what I hear from everybody. I cut my own steaks. Well, can we talk about that? Absolutely not. I'm insulted. I'm a chef. I cut my own stuff. Well, what do you do with the scraps? Oh, I put it in my stock. It's broth. It's fat. It's waste. Then I use the scraps for beef tips, tips and tails. Great. Got a good amount there. So I've got 8 fillets. Some beef tips and some chain. All right, so let's talk numbers here. I wonder how much these things weigh. Huh, it's exactly 1 pound. 1 pound. 1 pound. All right, so like I mentioned earlier, tenderloins, we got a really good price on these things right now. They are $10.94 a pound for a choice tenderloin. Insane. All right, so naturally, if it's $10.94 a pound and I'm serving an 8-ounce steak and I'm trying to figure out my food costs, then I just divide 11 by 2, right? $5.50, $11. Yes, I can count change too. So, $5.50 a steak. But of course we know that's not right. This tenderloin weighed 7.8 pounds at $10.94 per pound. The whole thing here, $85.33. I ended up getting 8 nice fillets out of that, which would make them $10.66 a piece. I also have a pound of beef tips here that's really clean, 100% usable, $10.94 a pound. Well, let's talk about the beef tips. $10.94 a pound for beef tips. I actually could get you beef tips and just a bag of beef tips for $8.06 a pound. Right? FoodPRO sells that. It's actually item number 58260. So I have the luxury of cutting my own steaks. I have a byproduct that I can use, but my byproduct's actually costing me about $2 a pound more than I need to pay for it. Doesn't make a lot of sense. But I have all this lovely stuff that I can put into my stock and spend hours skimming off the top because it's mostly just fat anyway. And I've spent a good amount of time cutting these. Then I have to wrap them, portion them. Depending on who's cutting them, they're not going to be too consistent. Coming out to $10.66 per steak. When you're doing food cost, you kind of got to think of it that way. How much did that tenderloin cost me? I don't talk about pounds and ounces and how much that costs. How many steaks did I get? I got 8 steaks. I paid $85 for the tenderloin, so each steak is going to cost me $10.66. Very simple math. How much did the tenderloin cost? How many steaks did I get? I've got beef tips, all that good stuff, right? So, or I could buy a tenderloin, 8-ounce filet, already cut, individually cryovac, and that thing is, for a choice one, $25.37 a pound. Why would I pay $25.37 a pound when I could get tenderloins for $10.94? Well, if I buy a pre-cut steak already individually cryovac. Somebody did all the work for me. They're perfectly weighed out and wrapped and everything, and it's $25.37 a pound. I can actually take that $25.37 a pound and divide by 2 because it's 100% usable. I don't have all these other beautiful things to go along with it. So at $25.37 a pound, this one is coming out $12.69 each. $2 more per steak. But I've saved all of this labor and extra worry. Now that's for a choice one, and it's an end-to-end product because, again, I cut an end-to-end tenderloin. I also want to talk about our North American value steaks, NAV for short. These actually come from a facility in Canada, so they're not graded. You can't call them choice. But how much marbling does a tenderloin have anyway? Really, it doesn't move. Your customers want, when they order a filet, they want to be able to cut it with a butter knife. So this North American value line is great, comes from Canada. It is USDA inspected, it's just not graded. So typically you could call it a no-roll product, but they're beautiful. It's a good steak. Those currently, for an 8-ounce end-to-end cut, are running $21.36 a pound. Again, you cut that in half to find out your portion cost, $10.68 a pound. So for 2 cents more, I can have an 8-ounce end-to-end prepackaged filet for my customers and not have to go through all of this. So you look at the portion cost, really that North American value is 2 cents more per steak, and the choice one is going to be $2 more per steak. And of course, tenderloins fluctuate. Again, I really was surprised to see a $10.94 a pound for a choice tenderloin. Other benefits of buying pre-cut steaks. We've mentioned already several times that they're individually cryovac. That extends your shelf life more than 3 times cutting your own. You cut these, they're good for 7 days, right? What happens if you have a slow day? You actually have these cut, you got spoilage, they're not as good. 7 days after you pop the cryo and cut them. So the clock's ticking on these things. This is good for really 60 days if you want. I think they say 30, but extends the shelf life. As long as the cryovac's not popped, these are good for a month, these are good for a week. That's a benefit, I think. Of course, your labor cost that's involved in this that we haven't even factored into cutting these, you can do the math on that. Inventory control. Typically when you cut these, you're cutting a bunch of them because you got a really busy restaurant, you're putting them in a pan, you're keeping them in the walk-in, and you're replenishing the line as you go. It's very hard to count. Sometimes they're stacked on top of each other. And they're going to be very consistent. They're going to be this. They're cut by meat cutters that are cutting them every day, all day long. That's what they do. So you're going to have a very consistent product. And inventorying in these things, you open the box, you can count them. One box, going to have 20 in there. So personally, it's cool to cut your own steaks, and we cut our own steaks here, but it really doesn't make a lot of economical sense for your operation. I think it makes a little more sense to buy the prepackaged one. And there you have it, folks. Thanks for cooking with FoodPRO.